Welcome, everyone. My name is Jack Chin, and I'm the chair of the CDBC Board of Directors. This year, registrants have been invited to attend the AGM virtually through a live webcast due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This technology allows us to reach all dietitians in BC. I'd like to take time to start this meeting by acknowledging that CDBC office and staff operate on unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations, whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. June is National Indigenous History Month. This year, it is dedicated to the missing children, the families left behind, and the survivors of the residential schools. Indigenous children matter. We honor and will always remember the lives of the 215 children from the Kamloops Indian Residential School, but also all the other Indigenous children who never made it home to their families. We take this time to invite dietitians to educate themselves on the history and impact of residential schools and be better allies to Indigenous communities and people who still endure to this day the impact of colonialism and racism. The AGM will run from 3 to 3:30 p.m., including a short question and answer period. After, we will transition to our education session led by the consulting firm HRX. Participants are automatically muted to minimize background noise. We'll still like to hear from you. Please write your questions in the Q&A box at any time during the AGM. Questions will be monitored but answered at the end. If we run out of time to answer any questions, you may also email us at info@collegedietitiansbc.org. and will follow up after the AGM. If you experience technical issues, please use the Q&A box to notify us, and we'll do our best to help you resolve the issue. Most issues are related to internet connection or workplace firewall. We're recording the session and the AGM today. We will provide you with a link to the recording soon after today's session. As a reminder, the college holds an AGM in accordance to Section 29 of the CDBC bylaw that states an annual general meeting of the college must be held in BC at a time and place determined by the board once in every calendar year and not more than 15 months after the last preceding AGM. There are 5 mandatory components of an AGM, namely the financial statements, the report of the auditor, the report of the board, the reports of the committees, and the minutes from the last AGM. I'd like to take a moment to review today's agenda. Are there any proposed additions? If so, please use the Q&A box to let us know. If there are no changes, I propose that CDBC registrants resolve to accept the agenda for the 2020-2021 AGM as circulated. Those in favor, please select yes in the poll. Thank you. The motion will be recorded in the minutes. Next, I will be introducing the CDBC board and staff. On this slide is a photo of our 2020-2021 board from last fiscal year. We had 4 public representatives: John Menegallo, who was our board chair, Don Grant, Jack Trunley, and Sarah Lalonde. We also had 6 registrants on the board: Jill Warboys, our vice chair last year, Tina Hartnell, Teresa Sividin, Katie Hunter, Anita Marriott, and myself, Jack Chin Ko. Tina Hartnell and Sarah Lalonde were missing from the Board of Directors photo. Next. On staff, We have Joanie Bouchard, our registrar, Melanie Journeau, deputy registrar, Ilana Sue, executive assistant and registration coordinator, Elaine Van Oosten, practice advisor, and Sabrina Lauser, registration and communication manager. I'll now like to move your attention to last year's AGM minutes. Participants had access to the draft minutes on the CDBC website last week, and we added the link provided in the chat box. I'd like to invite to see if there are any revisions. Please let us know in the Q&A box. Okay, seeing none, I'd like to move the following motion. CDBC registrants resolve to accept the minutes of the June 2022-2020 Annual General Meeting as circulated. Please vote using the poll. Okay. Thank you. This motion will be recorded in the minutes. I now invite you to turn to the annual report. You received the report by email last week. The 2020-21 annual report is a very comprehensive report of the college activity for the past fiscal year, which is also available on the CDBC website. I'd like to thank staff for putting together this professional document, which is very easy to read. I'll now highlight key board activities, and Joanie will report on the committee's activities. This slide highlights the most important matters overseen by the board, which include approval of version 3 of the integrated competencies for dietetic education and practice, approval of a new strategic plan, approval of bylaw changes for emergency registrations in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, policies and guidelines review for the restricted activities, oversight, and continuing competency program cycle changes, update to registration policies to reflect CDRE policy changes, update to QA policies to reflect changes in virtual practice requirement in other provinces. As well, there was no registration fee increase for the 2021-22 renewal year. And we also review policies on honoraria and per diem, and review of board and committees' competency matrices. I'll now turn it over to Joanie Bouchard, our registrar, to review highlights from each committee report.
Thank you, Jack-Chin. And thank you everyone for attending the college AGM today. Thank you for taking some time of your busy schedule to be with us. I'll go over the committee's report, the financial statements, and we'll have some time for a question at the end. You may also enter your question as we go. So the registration committee this year had a very busy year. I'm going to only highlight a few activities, but we please encourage you to review the annual report, who has a lot of information and also statistic and metrics that we include for you in there. So this year, the committee updated policies for board approval with regards to the Canadian dietetic registration examination on the third attempt. We also reviewed virtual practical interview guidelines and policy, and policies around remove and good standing. This year, we also completed a grant project that was supported by the ministry to create an online portal for international educated dietitians. And the committee also oversaw 13 upgrading requirements for internationally educated dietitians, and also approved 6 temporary registrations. The quality assurance was also very busy. They updated their policy for board review and approval on privacy and virtual practice. They provided direction on draft privacy guide, marketing standards, testimonial position statement, conflict of interest and sales guideline, and also social media guidelines. The completion of that work will come this year. They also reviewed and approved an updated QA committee competency matrix to include cultural safety and humility and equity, diversity, inclusion, knowledge, skill, and attitude for anti-racist inclusive decision-making. The practice advisory topics were also reviewed and published on the website this year, and thanks to Elaine Van Oosten for this work that she's done this year. I'm not going to read all of the topics that were updated this year because there's too many, but we've put them on the slide this year, and we encourage registrants to visit the website on the Q&A section and also on the quality assurance section on the website, where you can find information on these updated topics. The inquiry committee also did significant work this year. The committee also reviewed the competency matrix to include the same element that was mentioned for the quality assurance committee. They also reviewed phases 1 and 2 of a project that the college participated that was called Complaint Management Process Evaluation, with the firm Pivotal Research with 7 other BC health regulators. They attended an education session on recent case law on decision writing with the CDBC legal counsel, and they also reviewed and disposed of 7 complaint cases. I also want to take a brief time just to highlight that the college also does a lot more than just our statutory function. And this year in the annual report, we made a lot of effort to report on these to be transparent and accountable. So you'll find these information on the pages that are highlighted on these slides. So what the college did in response to the pandemic is on page 12. And we thank all dietitians who helped support the BC healthcare system during the pandemic. We know it's been a tough 15 months. And we really see all of the efforts that have been made. Thank you. As Jackson said, the board approved a new strategic plan this year, and we have provided information on page 10 about the progress that was made over the last 3 years with the older plan and the new plan that we'll start working on. We also included a section to provide information on the work that the board and the college did on the response to the modernization of the health profession regulatory framework. We also reported on all of the work we did with regards to cultural safety and humility, and we will keep reporting on what we are going to do to continue our effort. We'll hear later on about equity, diversity, and inclusion and the project that CDBC did this year, but you can find more information too on the annual report on page 15. And finally, I want to highlight that this year, the quality assurance conducted consultation on different documents, but especially the marketing standards that was finalized within this fiscal year. And we reported in the annual report about it on page 22nd. And we really appreciate all dietitians who participated and took time to provide some feedback on this work. I'll now go over the audited financial statement. This ends on March 31st. So you'll see on this slide a very summarized version. You will find all of the details of our audited financial statement at the end of the annual report, where you find the full report from our auditor with all of the findings. I'm highlighting here the comparison of the 2 years, so the year that we ended in March 2020 and this year that we ended in March 2021. So this year, our revenue were just slightly higher, partially because of the grant that we received from the ministry, as I've discussed, to support the project we did for our online portal for internationally educated dietitians. And our expenses were also higher in part because of that grant project, but also because of the work that was related to cultural safety and humility and equity, diversity, and inclusion. So if you accumulate the revenue, the expenses, and then the other expenses that are related to the depreciation of our furniture and expenditure, it comes down to an excess of revenue over expenses of $4,736. So this is fairly a balanced year. CDBC's auditor confirmed that the financial statement presents fairly in all material respect the condition in which CDBC operates. It also confirmed that we are in accordance with the Canadian accounting standard for nonprofit organization. The college also has what we call restricting funds. Those are internally restricted assets that may only be accessed through a board resolution. The purpose of these funds are to expected legal fees and discipline hearing, any unforeseen expenses, and purchase and maintenance of capital assets. In a board policy in 2005, the board approved to set a goal of $1 million for this fund. This goal was met in 2019, and therefore this year the board did not restrict any additional funds. I will now turn it over back to Jack Chin to manage the question and answer period. We encourage you to use the Q&A. Your question can be regarding the annual report, the financial statement, or any question in general. Thank you. Jack Chin, back to you.
Thank you so much, Joanie. Thank you. So as Joanie mentioned, if you have any questions, we invite you to enter your question in the Q&A chat box. In the meantime, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the CDBC staff for putting together our annual report. I recognize it's a lot of work, and thank you very much for putting it together for us.
Oh, hi, Jack Chin and Joanie. Thanks again for a great presentation. So we have one question from a registrant about ethical conduct. I'm guessing that relates to one of the inquiry cases that we've had. I'm not too sure what to answer since, the annual report doesn't speak to specific cases. I invite registrants to consult the case outcome reports. It's in the complaints section of our website. And there you will find detail about each of the cases that we've looked at over the year with the inquiry committee.
Yes, thank you, Melanie. Yeah, there is more information that a registrant can find about the outcome of complaint. We do respect the legislation that is applicable, so there's not always we make the case outcome report so that it preserves anonymity unless we need to disclose the name of the registrant, which is prescribed in legislation. But the case outcome report are published in a way so that it can also be an education opportunity for registrant to understand the nature of complaint we get, how they are investigated, and what the outcome can be so that we can mitigate the risk to the public.
So we have a follow-up questions about whether or not there are trends in the type of unethical conduct complaints that the college receives. And again, I'd have to say yes and no. It really depends on the year and the caseload that we receive. So for 2020, 2021, I'd have to say that there is no real trend, that some of the cases were quite different from each other as far as ethical conduct was concerned.
Yeah, I can also add that in general, when speaking with other health regulator in BC and across Canada, definitely with the evolution of social media and the use of technology to practice, we do see more complaints that can be related to that. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that there's more issue, just that the profession and the way we practice has evolved. So naturally, the type of complaint we get may be a little bit different.
So we got a couple more questions. One relates to the EDI report and asks if we can share more information about why we didn't include information about sexual orientation in the EDI audit.
Yes, we also have Weil Bowing, who's here with us, and I think we could address that question during at the end of his presentation, because that would fit well. We will talk about the finding of the audit, and we'll also be speaking about the methodology of the audit. So I think if that is okay, I would keep this question for to discuss at the presentation, and both Weil and myself can speak to this one when we get there.
Thank you, Joanie. And we have one last question about how many registrants are in attendance at this AGM. And right now I see there's 52 of us in attendance. We have one last question, Joanie and Jackson. Do you know how many dietitians are involved in virtual care in BC?
I can speak to this one. This is not an information we collect officially, so that is not something I could provide as an accurate data. We know that through the question we get at the practice advisory level, definitely, and of course with the pandemic over the last year, it seems to be increasing. We are getting frequent questions on this topic. But in terms of actual data, that it's not something I could provide accurately, and that we collect through our system.
Sorry, if I may just go back to the question about the unethical conduct. Just wanted to mention that in the annual report, under the inquiry committee report, there is a table on the number of cases, complaints, allegations that the inquiry committee looked at last year. And then there's also a different, in terms of different categories, like there were 17 cases, I believe, and unethical conduct was there were about 6 cases. And incompetence to practice 7 cases, marketing and non-evidence informed practice 2 cases, illegal practice of restricted activity 1, and illegal use of Title I. So these information is available to all in the annual report.
Thank you, Jackson. I have one more question from a registrant. If we could please comment on the strategic planning process at the CDBC.
Yes, I can start answering, and Jackson, feel free to add. This year process was a little bit different than what we normally do for a few specific reasons. As we've discussed over the past year, the college is currently operating in a context that we are awaiting legislation amendments to modernize the regulatory framework in which we operate as a college. And some of these changes will include most likely a merger with other organizations, but also other changes regarding governance and management of complaints. So for that reason, the board agreed that it was not timely to go through a very expanded process of strategic planning. And we decided to be discussing especially those specific circumstances that we were operating in. And so last November, we did a facilitated session to be looking at the current CDBC workload and our mandate and how we could be preparing ourselves for the changes coming and yet supporting other important priorities such as cultural safety and humility and equity, diversity, and inclusion. And that's what drove most of the strategic planning session. When we did the last plan, we had gone through more of a formal process where we did an environmental scan, be looking at literature. We had done a few facilitated sessions with the board and staff and came up with a plan that was approved then. Jack-Chin, is there any information you'd like to add?
Thank you, Joanie. That was great. Yeah, as Joanie mentioned, in the past when we did the a fuller in terms of the planning, we also look at like potential risks, that's coming. And for this year, because we're in a unique juncture right now with the modernization coming in, we have updated the strategic plan accordingly with that in mind. So we're now nearing the end of our AGM. We need one more decision before adjourning the meeting and moving to our education session. Are there any suggestions for revisions to the annual report? So there is so seeing none, I would like to move the following resolution. CDBC registrants resolve to accept the 2020-21 annual report as circulated. All in favor, please vote. Thank you. So motion passed. This will be recorded in the minutes. Thank you. So we are now ready to adjourn the AGM. Please vote online to adjourn the AGM. Thank you. So the CDBC 17th Annual General Meeting is now adjourned at 3:32 p.m. Please stay on the next session presented by HRX on equity, diversity, and inclusion. For those who may still have questions, please contact staff at the office. At the end of the session today, there will be a survey link sent to you to get your feedback. Please take some time to provide us with some feedback. Thank you, everyone.